Hi, it's Dwyer, gamblersadvisory.com, dwyervip.com. Remember, the opinion you should follow should be your own. Just consider this video to be a second opinion from a complete stranger online. Now, one of the things about boxing is that it's better than advertised, right? The storylines, the people involved in boxing, you'll be surprised by the richness of their past, right? Young people look at some of the older folks and they don't know the history. Let's talk about the history. Let's talk about a trainer who is rapidly becoming this close to taking over boxing's glamour division, the heavyweight division. Now, in 1984, and old-timers remember this, the Olympics was held in Southern California. It was a big moment for the United States. This was back when you had a lot of patriotic movies being made. This was back when, America had a Cold War going with the Soviet Union. You had a wall separating Berlin. It was a different world. And America had a light heavyweight, amateur, who was turning heads. His name was Evander Holyfield. Now, you might know the name because Holyfield went on to do big things as a pro. He beat Riddick Bowe in the rematch, one of the more important fights in recent heavyweight history, because if Bowe wins that fight, if there's not Fan Man, the history books would look awfully different. Right? But Holyfield becomes heavyweight champ. Holyfield goes on to beat Mike Tyson twice. Right? Holyfield had his moments. He gets a draw, questionable, but he gets a draw with Lennox Lewis. Right? Holyfield is a guy who had one of boxing's better careers, fought some big opponents. Well, Holyfield gets to the medal rounds, and he's in against a New Zealand fighter, Kevin Barry. And Holyfield looks too fast for Barry. The referee then steps in and says, stop. Right? There's a lull in the action. Holyfield looks like he's in the process of throwing a punch. He throws the punch. It lands. His opponent is decked. Evander Holyfield gets disqualified. Kevin Barry wins the silver medal at the Olympics, right? Well, that Kevin Barry, the guy who beat Evander Holyfield by disqualification in one of amateur boxing's more memorable fights from the 1980s, is now the trainer for unbeaten heavyweight champion Joseph Parker. He's also the trainer for unbeaten heavyweight contender Izu Ugonoh, right? Izu Ugonoh, who is scheduled to fight on the undercard of the Gerald Washington-Deontay Wilder fight against Dominic Breazeale, the guy who fought and lost to Anthony Joshua. Right, taking Joshua deeper in that fight than Joshua had been as a professional. The Ugonoh versus Breazeale fight is a major fight with regards to the future. Understand, if Ugonoh wins that fight, right, he's connected. He has Joseph Parker's trainer as his trainer. He'll be unbeaten. He has a greater than 80% knockout ratio. He'll be in the mix for big fights at heavyweight. Now, let's lift the curtain on one of boxing's secrets out there. I believe that casual fans believe that the trainers all agree on the right way to do things. That if you're a superstar trainer, and if you were to go to a superstar trainer convention, And if you were to be with Nacho Beristain, Freddie Roach, Robert Garcia, right, Kevin Barry, all of the superstar trainers out there, Virgil Hunter, right? If you were to be with the guys who have a lot of champions, I believe casual fans think that everyone would be in agreement on most things, right? People would be, looking around the room and they would be nodding a lot, in agreement on the proper way to throw a jab, the proper way to throw a hook, the proper way to shift your body, the proper way to clinch, right? I believe casual fans believe that there's a book on the proper way to do things, and everyone follows that book. The truth is very different. Very different. Just look at the trash talk between John David Jackson, right, Sergey Kovalev's trainer, and Virgil Hunter, Andre Ward's trainer, before those two fought. Right? Let's just say both guys disagreed with things the other guy was doing. Right? Now, Virgil Hunter has won a Trainer of the Year award. John David Jackson has come awfully close. But yet these two esteemed guys couldn't really agree. Let me go one step further. Freddie Roach in interviews, when he gets on a roll, will start claiming that, let's say, Virgil Hunter's not that good at teaching defense. Right? The guys don't agree, folks. Understand, boxing is balkanized. In other words, you have different tribes, different teachers, convinced that their way of thinking and teaching is the right way to go about things. So, let's talk about my bias. And let's talk about Kevin Barry's style here. Now, for me, right, my idea of an elite fighter, a guy who throws a jab the right way, right, is a guy who uses length. In other words, if you're tall, right, I want the guy who throws a lean into his jab, so he's hard to find as he throws the jab. So let's just look at the heavyweight division, right? Emmanuel Stewart. I liked his training style. In my opinion, he had two of the elite heavyweights of the last 3 decades. Lennox Lewis. When Lewis was in shootouts, you notice Lewis would lean back. Right? Great jab. But when the kitchen got hot, Lewis hit his head, he hit his chin, he would lean back. Right? Vladimir Klitschko throws a jab. You always are conscious of his height, because Klitschko knows how to lean away from you. Right? His chin is not in front of his feet. He leans back. Right? Muhammad Ali threw a jab, could lean away from you. In other words, Sonny Liston's throwing shots on Ali, he's just leaning. Right? It's a full body defensive construct. Ali is completely conscious of distance between him and the opponent. Vladimir Klitschko, same type thing. Right? If you study Emmanuel Stewart and go back to Thomas the Hitman Hearns, right, who really put Emmanuel on the map, you're going to notice that Tommy Hearns, with a dynamite punch, right, he was the hitman, leaned away from you. Right? The two guys, by the way, Hearns and Stewart, had a disagreement. believe it or not, over how Hearns handled his fight against Marvin Hagler. Because that wasn't what Stewart wanted. Hearns was a warrior. Hearns came out. Hearns' bright idea was he was going to trade shots with Marvelous Marvin Hagler. Right? I'm from the Emanuel Stewart school. You're taller than the guy. You have a great jab. You have a great right hand. Set the right hand up. Lean back. Use length. Let the shorter man understand that he's going to have to reach to hit you. Right? Kevin Barry doesn't agree with that philosophy. One of the problems I have with Joseph Parker, one of the problems I have with Izu Ugonoh, is that these guys lean forward as they jab. Right? You're going to notice that these guys throw a jab as part of fighting small, even though both Parker and Izu are well over 6 feet tall. Right? Even though both Parker and Izu, who are both unbeaten, right, have big punches, are great athletes. Both guys have above average legs. Both guys can move. But yet neither guy wants to lean. Right? Neither guy is a Vitaly Klitschko disciple, where the guy is leaning and hitting you with the jab and exploiting his reach, forcing you to come across his body to come find him. Now let me say, right, in my opinion, the difference between Mike Tyson and David Haye, and understand, both guys are big punchers. I think there's an open question personally, and look, I lived through the 80s. Tyson's one of the hardest punchers I've ever seen in my life. But I think there's a big question on who actually hits harder. Because David Haye is an underrated puncher. Huge puncher. The difference between David Haye and Tyson, why David Haye to me was able to go 12 rounds with Vladimir Klitschko, is you'll actually notice while Mike Tyson couldn't lean back, right, couldn't lean back, when the pocket collapses on Tyson and the buildings start falling down and it's an earthquake, Mike Tyson didn't know what to do with Evander Holyfield. Holyfield's teeing off on him. What you notice with David Haye, who isn't in there throwing a jab, he's not an Emanuel Stewart fighter, right? David Haye is in there trying to he's in there trying to hide and then blitzkrieg the pocket. But you'll notice that when the buildings start falling down, when there's an earthquake, David Haye can actually lean away from punches. Right? He can put his head on a swivel. He can put his upper body on a swivel. I think that makes him a much better fighter. Now, I am not sure. Now, Kevin Barry's been phenomenally successful, right? He's even been involved with Beibut Shumanov, who's one of the cruiserweight champions. Right? Kevin Barry's been phenomenally successful. But I'm just not sure what happens if the buildings start crumbling, the pocket becomes a rough place, an opponent starts hunting against Joseph Parker or Izu Ugonoh. And these guys actually have to start dodging shots on their back foot. Right? The problem with guys who jab, and both guys have excellent jabs, the problem with guys who jab leaning forward isn't their head too easy to hit? right? The guy's leaning forward and he's throwing a jab like this. Isn't the guy's head vulnerable to uppercuts? Isn't it vulnerable to a tall man like a Dominic Breazeale punching down on the guy's head? In other words, this is the opposite of the dynamic I believe Anthony Joshua is going to find against Vladimir Klitschko, where you're in there, you want to knock the other guy out, but you realize his head's too far away for you to hit him. And if you overextend yourself to hit the guy in the head, the guy might counter you and knock you out. So, since I feel Dominic Breazeale is a good workman, I believe his strength is mental toughness. Right? He took a lot of shots against Anthony Joshua. I don't believe Breazeale is that talented. He doesn't strike me as fast-handed. Right? He doesn't strike me as a superior athlete. But the guy does have good basic defense. The guy does use length a little bit better than Izu Ugonoh. Right? Because I have doubts about Ugonoh's lean forward style and because I'm biased, I'm taking Dominic Breazeale in this fight. I think Ugonoh is going to find a guy in front of him who's going to know that Ugonoh is leaning forward, doesn't hide his head that well. And I believe Breazeale is going to figure out how to shorten his punches to hurt him. Didn't Breazeale beat Mansour, a guy who was shorter, who liked to come forward? I like Breazeale in this fight. I'll concede that if Barry's fighter wins this fight, you're looking at Barry having two very well-placed, unbeaten heavyweights, one of them with a belt, right? He'll be as perfectly situated as any trainer in the heavyweight division. I like Dominic Breazeale in this one against unbeaten Izu. Let's see what happens. Let me hear from you. I hope you leave your comments in the comment section to this video. Thanks for stopping by.